You're watching Funding What Works, Ensuring Safe Communities, a community conversation presented by Free Press, WHYY, and Reclaim Philadelphia. Good evening to everyone. Again, my name is Chris Norris. I also go by Flood the Drummer. You can just call me Flood. I'm the managing editor of Community and Engagement at WHYY, which is your local PBS and NPR affiliate. According to the Safety We Can Feel survey published by the Movement Alliance Project, there exists a sizable public will for Philly to invest in solutions that address gun violence, affordable housing, mental health services, public safety, and schools, issues that should not be handled by police. As conversations around the budget and the control and influence of the FOP build up, how can community-led programs aimed at reducing violence and improving public safety receive more attention, investments, and support to expand their successful programs? What barriers are stemming community solutions from achieving their mission of a safer world? That is what we're going to discuss tonight with a panel of experts. And before we get into the conversation, we'll have each one introduce themselves. Kendra Vandewater, you're up first.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kendra Vandewater. I'm the Executive Director of Youth Empowerment for Advancement Hangout. We started programming in 2019 based on just going around the neighborhood and talking to young people. But we provide holistic support services for young people in West and Southwest Philly, teens and young adults up to age 21 who are impacted by violence. And so what that looks like is we go to court. We have a primary focus of young people coming out of the detention center and needing community support, court advocacy, case management. We do a lot of conflict resolution and peer mediation training. And we just make sure that young people's experiences, specifically Black young people, are elevated in our communities. And we bring them together to try to push back against oppressive systems and, change the narrative around how we invest and treat young people in our communities. So we do a lot of community organizing work and just, making sure that our people get the things that they need and reducing barriers all the way around. So happy to be here with you all.
My name is Michael Butler. I am the Executive Director of MannUP, as well as Workforce Development Coordinator for the Institute of Community Justice. MannUP was started to combat gun violence in the city of Philadelphia and SCI Phoenix by a group of men, who had experience, by, bringing some of that corruption to our neighborhoods. So, what we do, we are a nonprofit, like I said, which started in SCI Phoenix. We were deeply disheartened by the stories of carnage unfolding in our neighborhoods, where many of these men, called home, while we were oppressed under the confines of incarceration. We wanted to spearhead efforts to develop and implement comprehensive programming that embraces personal accountability, that promotes social responsibility, and that provides teachings considered fundamental to lessons of manhood. So, what we do, we have a comprehensive 15-week program, and we also conduct weekly mentoring efforts through therapeutic group sessions for citizens returning from incarceration, as well as engaging in group community restoration through neighborhood cleanup events and assisting in various measures to uplift communities through accesses to opportunities and support.
Hi, I'm Jacqui with Sankofa Healing Studio. I'm the founder of Sankofa, which is a nonprofit that really looks at making sure there is therapeutic support in the community, specifically in the Black community, around racial trauma, oppression-based trauma that people experience, and more importantly, mass incarceration, what that looks like as far as the mental health impact, and recognizing that oftentimes people who are caught up in the system have been oppressed and who have experienced all kinds of trauma before ever being incarcerated. So really being able to meet people where they are and to provide those therapeutic supports. For me, I'm a social justice art therapist, also use play therapy, and a hip hop therapist as well. So really looking at making sure we meet the community where they are.
Hello, I'm Chantay. I'm one of the founders and the directors of EMIR Healing Center, which stands for Every Murder is Real. We are a community-based organization that have been working with families and communities that have been impacted by homicide and violent crimes. We offer trauma-informed and holistic approaches to healing. I will tell you that advocacy to the healing emotional part, we do alternative ways from yoga to meditation to a awesome art therapy, things that we decided that people would need to do stuff that they're into or that they love, and that we start to look at our culture and different ways to heal. We also treat trauma because tell people a lot, untreated trauma perpetuates violence. And if we don't get to the root of that, then we will run into this cycle. We have therapists, we have counselors, we have case managers, we have a team of awesome men and women that are working with people that have been harmed and those who have caused harm. And we have another component where we are unshedding the layers of incarceration, for offering a healing component for those who have been locked up, because there is a level of pain that happens that breaks the spirit of a person while they are incarcerated. And how do they regain that again? Thank you.
So what brings us to this conversation tonight is a discussion of ensuring safe communities by funding what works. And so let's start with that idea of a safe community. What does a safe community look and feel like?
You know, it really depends on who it is that's asking the question and who's responding. Safe looks very different to many of us. And I think that's one of the things that we need to recognize and name within our cities. You know, does safe look like looking a certain way or having a certain type of education and background and socioeconomic status? Or does safe look like people who are enjoying life, who are enjoying just being their authentic selves? I think that's one of the core things that, you know, we can't ignore. We can't talk about safety without talking about oppression. So yeah, I kind of a difficult question, but, you know, ultimately when we're talking about safety, we're talking about people being able to have access to resources, to their basic necessities, you know, food, housing, education, employment, all of those things. That's what a safe community looks like. Because when people have their basic necessities met, they show up different. And we're able to engage each other in a much different way. When people are having to exist in spaces to survive, survival looks very different. So I think I'll end it there, but yeah, it really depends on who we're talking to.
The question is asked a lot, and we keep going around in circles and circles with it. But I think that people's needs, they need to be met, right? I think poverty, if we eliminate those insecurities, it's safe. Lack of opportunities, Jacqui said it again. If we have opportunities, we're safe. That means jobs. That means good schools. That means even having nurses in some of our schools. Like she said, safe looks different to each and every one of us. I mean, in some of the schools that I grew up in, we didn't even have a school nurse. You know what I'm saying? So, like, safety. I think that when we're not house or, you know, home insecure, food insecure, money insecure, that's when it becomes safe. That's when I don't have to fight to survive. That's when I don't have to, you know, look at you and be envious of what you have because I don't. So that's what safety looks like to me. When everyone's needs are met, we can go ahead and stay in our lane and be safe.
I will say also equity and resources. Our communities need to be able the ability to thrive, not just survive, to live and to have those basic necessities of our young people, our children having the ability to dream and to establish who they are. I do believe that because we're not a safe community, that they are being hunted by a racist system and hunting each other, that they do not get to expand to what family, village, possibilities, and real opportunities that they should receive. And so that's what it's for me. Equal resources, equal opportunity, equal health care, equal education, equal the and a community that's not racist, that has unraveled, cut out the racist system and culture so that we can thrive and have that thing what we consider people always shooting for the American dream that's never obtainable for our people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I feel like we need to be able to come out of our houses and walk down the street without someone telling me, oh, you shouldn't be walking down the street at 9 p.m. because it's unsafe out here. I should be able to walk around my own neighborhood. I should be able to go shopping when I want to. I should be able to go get something to eat when I want to. Kids should be allowed to play in the street without fear of something happening to them. Safety to me looks like where I grew up. I grew up in Montgomery County. I didn't lock my car doors every day. I didn't lock my windows every day. I don't open my windows in my house because there's so much stuff going on right now. So for me, it looks and feels like we should be able to do the things that we want to do without feeling like we have to go step on somebody's neck to make something happen for me or my family. It looks like our kids should be able to have meals. And it looks like, you know, we should be able to go to the doctor whenever we want to. We shouldn't have to walk outside of our houses and see piles of trash flying down the street. And, you know, these are the things that to me contribute to community safety. And we shouldn't live in food deserts and all of these things. And our people should have access to things that we pay for. And we, you know, in the suburbs, it looks very different. But when really our communities can look like Center City looks like, it can feel like Center City feels like. So that's from my perspective, what safety looks and feels like.
I have to ask, you know, given what we saw this week with a young man in his 20s, who was shot down in an array of bullets at 3rd and Chestnut, where, you know, that is not supposed to happen, right? Quote unquote. It doesn't happen here, it happens there. Does that make you think differently about the concept of safety in Center City, or was that more of an exception, not the rule?
No, it doesn't make me think differently about it because violence can happen everywhere. And it's not about, you know, oh, we're going to completely eradicate it or it will never happen here. But the reality is it happens way less there. And, you know, people can shop there and they can walk around there at all times of the night and feel more safe. I live in West Philly. I'm in Cobbs Creek. I'm at 59th and Locust Street. And every day, you know, I have a dog, we walk the dog, and every day somebody is like, oh, you're walking your dog all the time. You shouldn't be walking around your neighborhood by yourself. No, I should be able to walk around my neighborhood by myself. So, you know, while it happens everywhere, violence does, and shootings and killings do, it happens less in places that are invested in.
Jacqui, to get to these ideas, you know, let's take what Kendra says as an example. That Center City is the quintessential idea of a safe community. What do we need to fund at 59th and Locust and at 31st and Tasker, at 19th and Berks, 22nd and Susquehanna? What do we need to fund in those areas so that they do feel safe, like Center City or King of Prussia or Montgomery County?
Well, we need to clean the streets.
Mm-hmm.
We need to have schools that actually have books and are clean, that children can go to. We need to have playgrounds where they can play and where parents can escort their kids and have conversations. You know, we need to invest in the community, and we need to invest in the community with the community resources, like with the actual community members, the grassroots organizations, not funding outside resources to come in and to attempt to fix problems that they don't even understand. And oftentimes that they contribute to. When you look at a lot of our schools, it's also about representation. You know, we need to invest in people that look like the community, in all aspects of the community, so then that way people feel a sense of, you know, going back to kind of that village mentality where we can interact with each other, we can support each other and not feel that we are being threatened. which unfortunately in many cases we don't feel really cared for. And that's really the thing. People need to be seen, heard, validated, and feel cared for. And those are the kinds of programs and organizations that we need to invest in.
Jacqui, if I can, just to follow up with you, it's not lost on me that the first thing you said was clean the streets, and I saw a nod of support from Chantay and from Michael as well. To you, in your opinion, what is the connection between blight and safety, or grime and safety, or the lack thereof?
So we have to think about mental wellness. So the way our environment looks affects how we feel. It affects our ability to dream. It affects our ability to have hope. It affects our ability to feel worthy. So all of those things, just those very basic things that are huge, it impacts our mental health and wellness. And if we aren't well in those areas, we have a very difficult time succeeding as a community.
There has been a study that stated, I did a panel discussion with, I forgot the sister's name, who actually took a part of North Philadelphia to change the environment, and the level of violence lessened. So it's to me, some things we make it too complicated to correct. It's some things we make it too large to seem like it's impossible. It's simple to me. Will your child thrive if they were playing in a sandbox or playing in a garbage can? Mm-hmm. And so this is a humane issue that we have to find the problem of people not feeling like that we are human enough to have the equal opportunity and the equal environment that they have. We have a humane problem. We have a racist problem. And funding works that build our environment, treat the trauma, make sure we have great education, housing, and opportunity to have to make a living is not a hard thing to ask. It's not. It's a humane thing to have. I feel like we are fighting for this thing that really God gave it to us. And why are we not challenging the powers that be to do a better thing? Why are we not challenging? Why are the powers that be struggling with making it right?
Because I thought what Chantay said about humanity was very impactful. And I wondered if you agree that the reason that 24th and Somerset looks different from 24th and Walnut is a matter of humanity and the willingness to see the humans who live there as such.
Absolutely. I mean, we cannot talk about safety without talking about how people fund what they feel is deserving. How, all of this is rooted in structural racism. We can't have this conversation without that. So if the people we feel we are funding and we look at them and say, oh, well, they're not deserving of this because we are complicit in a racist system, then it's not going to be funded. I absolutely think it's a humanity problem. And we have to look at people as people. And that's the other thing, right? Like we don't treat people as people, specifically people of color and Black people. We do not treat our people the way they should be treated. So it's, I see someone who said, saying that places like Center City and Montgomery County are safe, even though those places have heavy police presence. It's about how it looks though as well. There's no trash piled up in Center City or Montgomery County because the mayor would not allow that. That would not happen. So just the fact that we don't have street cleaning like there is in Center City all throughout the city means that the mayor and the city does not see our neighborhoods as being equal.
Mm-hmm. And, just a quick follow-up, Kendra, I have heard people say, and they've self-admitted to be cynics, that if the shootings were to continue at, let's say, 3rd and Chestnut in front of Budokan, that it would only take a matter of minutes before Stephen Starr and others who have never said anything about this issue before could rally the city bureaucracy enough to make change. Would you agree with that statement?
Absolutely. And it shouldn't have to take something happening to someone directly or someone's business to be impacted for someone to use their privilege and stand up for what essentially everyone deserves. And that's what we need to do, right? I feel like exposure of the harm that people do is like the only way that people may stand up for something, or how their business, their bottom line has to be affected because, say, you know, they may not have as many customers anymore. So now they're going to be upset because that shooting has impacted their bottom line in terms of money. And it shouldn't have to take that, because even if you're not directly impacted, gun violence impacts everybody. And you would not want your child or your family member or any of that to be going through these things. And we should not have to say, oh, well, if it happens to you, then you'll understand, because that's not the case.
I think it's like, you know, it's one of the reasons why we started our organization, right? That community restoration. We have a feeling of just being numb. So, you know, our neighborhoods, like Jacqui and Chantay and Kendra said, the dirt is there. It makes us numb. It makes me not care for anything in that environment. I'm already living in a house that's on top of another house, right? So when I come out, my neighbor he is so close to me, right? And then I walk down my steps and there's broken glass. And you know, what do? I go to the store, I get a bag of chips, I finish those chips. I don't even think about dropping that on the ground because that's my trash. That is the trash. And the trash can is right next to me. But I'm so numb to my community being so jacked up that I don't even care. And that transcends into violence. So I think that the money, we're talking about money, you know, it has to be invested in the things that are staples in our communities. These local businesses, they should hire these kids in these communities to work, because when a person cleans up trash, the intent behind that is for that person to have pride. Because if I get a new car, you better not touch that car. And I'm out there every day shining it up because I take pride and respect in that car. In this dirty neighborhood, you better not touch that car. So translate that to picking up trash on my block. If we say that it's cool to do that, I'm not going to let you drop trash in front of my house no more.
Thank you for that, Michael. Jacqui, you know, the mayor will be announcing his budget, or at least proposing his budget in a week. I mean, I have some more questions around funding, but you know, I find this environment littering conversation so profound. Should we be thinking about, I mean, something so minor as a line item for citywide sweeping? And I know that was something that was talked about a couple years ago, and then the pandemic hit and other things happened. But should that be a priority when we're thinking about reducing gun violence? I mean, others may say there are other things that should come first, but I mean, that was, it's just, again, it's not lost on me. That was the first thing that you said when you thought about that. And so would that be something that's major?
It shouldn't be something that's a conversation. Like, this shouldn't even be a part of the consideration of what the budget looked like. It should already be in the budget, in the story period. So when we're talking about how do we invest in our communities and how do we make things better, trash isn't it. I mean, it just isn't, because it isn't in other communities. I could see and I could rationalize that conversation only if we could drive throughout the city and we see the same thing. It's not about just the trash, it's about equity. But what we're talking about is just these basic examples of how equity isn't accessible. And that is what we need to talk about in all of the cases. And that's the thing. It's really not about creating a new wheel. It's about distribution of wealth and distribution of resources. I think it's just as simple as that. You know, it pains me that we have to have a conversation and fight to get the trash picked up when we can go less than a mile and it's not a conversation or consideration ever.
You're talking about trash picked up. Trash picked up with people that are employed at that wage are normally people that should be in that community. that cycle of when we're talking about changing the environment, we're talking about the environmental change. That's not only the way it looks, that's, like she said, equity resources. That's allowing people who is in that community to have ownership of that community. This is a systematic thing that has occurred. Now, I'm not going to blame the people that are there, because what we do, we know what the psychic and we know what the mental state of someone is constantly beat down. There's very hard chances of looking for love, peace, hope, prosperity. But we're changing the environment, and changing the environment not only means how it looks, those who are invested in it and those who are inside of it. It's more than trash. It's all of those things. She's given an example because it's such a small thing. Mm-hmm. Like, that's an easy thing. That's like a no-brainer. Okay, we need to hire some folks in the community that to clean up. Simple.
Now, Chantay, let me just ask, what would you say to those who would push back and say people should clean up their own neighborhoods, whether they're paid or not?
You have a community that is suffering, and they're just trying to keep food in the house, their lights on. The thought of me going outside to sweep, I'm not even thinking about it. Mm-hmm. By the time I try to get home, and two parents that are working 2 or 3 jobs, and my child coming to a school that you know is not standard, to try to help them compete, I'm not thinking about sweeping. Uh-huh.
When we talk about even going out and sweeping, what it winds up being is we're also, when we talk about trauma and trauma-informed care, of talking about what has happened, not what did you do or what did you not do. And there's plenty of areas in the city that I go that they are cleaning. And what's happening is the bags aren't being picked up. The rodents come, the stray animals come, they rip up that trash, and then it's still there. So I think, so again, to Chantay's point, and the way that I'm using it is an example of, again, how there isn't trauma-informed care throughout the city, because it's about what we should be doing and what we did wrong, rather than what is happening and why is that happening. So again, it's blaming the residents, but there's tons of bags I've seen, and they're just sit there.
We clean the Strawberry Mansion area. Literally, we go out there, and these neighbors, they see us, and it's like, we're superstars, bro. And all we doing is picking trash up. That's all we doing. And we go to these neighborhoods because there are bags just sitting out there. And we have some connections where I work, thank God, that we can call the trash company. It's that easy that I can pick up a phone and call the trash company and tell you I cleaned this block up and come pick this trash up, but it's been sitting here for months. Come on.
I'm going to shift this conversation and start with you, Kendra. We were just talking about what we weren't funding enough of, and we talked about street cleaning and technology and books and all great answers. I want to go to what we're funding too much of, right? The polar opposite of that conversation. What are we putting way too much money into? The floor is yours.
We are putting way too much money into policing. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I mean, when it comes to just violence prevention, I believe the city has a law enforcement mentality. Everything is, we're partnering with law enforcement for, this initiative, and we have another initiative that is law enforcement led. Their budget is extremely high. Our communities are over policed, and they still say that the department is about 2,000 cops short. I don't see how, but we are seeing that these law enforcement led interventions are not working. They're not working. And when we talk about violence and reducing violence, it should not be led by the law enforcement narrative, because we see that we need to fund things like mental health services. We see in our schools, the resources that we don't have as Philadelphia public schools, but yet we continue to cut their budgets and then give more money to the police department when it needs to be the other way around. So definitely all of the interventions that are happening should not be law enforcement led, and we should not be giving more money to the police like we do every single year.
Kendra, what would it look like if the knee-jerk reaction of the city government when they're faced with a violence epidemic like this is, we need to partner with community and not law enforcement? If the instinct was community first, how would that look different? What would be the impact?
I think the impact would be, when kids are court ordered to go get a job or they're court ordered to get mental health services, I think that they wouldn't have to wait 7 months to see a therapist or never be able to see a Black therapist. I think that, law enforcement has their role, but it's not the role that we keep saying that, they're supposed to do. Law enforcement are not social workers. They're not trained to be holistic. And our approach to these things need to be more holistic. So when we say people, should be funding these services, people should be able to go to their doctor, whenever they feel that there's an issue. They should be able to walk to a grocery store and buy the things that they need for their family and not living in a food desert. So investing in these things like the mental health services, like keeping our rec centers open, right? All of those shootings that just happened at 56 and Christian Street at Christie Rec Center. That rec center looks like a prison. There is no one there. And I believe that if that pool was filled, if there were activities there, if there were people there, people wouldn't be shooting up a rec center. So we need to be investing in our young people. And when our young people tell us that they need things to do after school into the late night, those are the things that we should make sure that they have to do, and things that they want to do, not things that we as the city or adults or whoever are saying, oh, well, this is what our kids need. No, we need to listen to the community, because the communities know what we need. It's that people are not listening to us.
Thank you for that, Kendra. Michael, I'm going to come to you in just a second. Jacqui, what are we funding too much of?
Programs that don't work.
Okay.
I mean, it is what it is, right? Some programs that don't work. Kind of to Kendra's point, law enforcement are not social workers or mental health providers. And although there are, there's some programs and partnerships, you can't represent my oppressor and be my healer at the same time. It just doesn't happen. So really taking a look at that, and even, even not even just policing, but policing in our schools with our children. So, we're investing in so much of the, the metal detectors and the extra security in the schools, but not investing in the books, not investing in the mental health providers, not investing in the after school activities, all of those things. So yeah, some things that we just know that don't work, but things that we've been used to doing, we need to stop because they just don't work.
We're funding too much, or programs that look good on paper or in theory, but they're not practical, right? They look good, but they're not practical. And they give them this money because it looks good on paper, because they're not the people that's involved in these communities. They don't know. So if you give me something to read and it looks good and I got the money to give it to you, oh yeah, here you go. But they're not doing those programs that they have. They're not doing anything is because they're not asking the community what it is that they need. They're just force feeding it down our mouths and saying, let that work. Let's see if that works. It needs to be way more funding in peer activities. And what I mean by peer, it means that people should be getting this money that are from that community, that know what's going on, that looks just like me. Because, I'm willing to listen. I've been through it. I know what it takes. And that's basically what it is. So I just think that with everything that Kendra and Jacqui said, but I think we're just giving too much money to these organizations that look good on paper, but they're not practical.
Everything that they say, I agree. All I can really add to it is they're funding too much programs that are not led by the people that they are serving. That is not being led by people that they are serving, that look like people they're serving, not being led by, supported by people that they are serving, that is not culturally proficient, that have issues, and they fund organizations and groups that are under the label of crime prevention, but not having a success rate and not really having a community relationship. And I will tell people now, And a lot of this is happening because how they think about us that are what my colleague told me, leaders on the ground. We're leaders on the ground. So you don't consider us have enough academia. But what they don't realize is that we not only write proposals, we not only create programming, we not only make outcomes, we not only create policies, but the difference between us is that we know how to talk to the community. Mm. And so they're not funding people that look like us.
Kendra, this is for you, if you will. How do we reduce gun violence without perpetrating two dominant ideas that Black and brown neighborhoods are inherently dangerous and that white affluent places like Center City or Montgomery County are safe since those places have heavy police presence?
I mean, I think that's a pretty simple answer. Everything that we talked about, right? Those are the things that we have to invest in. If we're saying that we believe if people have access to the basic needs, which our people do not have access to, then that is how we reduce gun violence. But at the same time, we also have to learn about things around, our communities. Like, we teach our community, do not call 911 for everything. Like, education around these things. And, when I spoke on those examples, it was on a standpoint of how something looks versus, we talk about the trash and the trees and all of this. So for me, for the suburbs and, Center City, they also have dollars going into things that are there. So they have dollars going into making sure that you have grocery stores there, right? You have dollars going into the schools. Like, our politicians' kids do not go to certain schools for a reason. Their money is funding the schools that their kids go to, just like Montgomery County. And I went to a public school in the suburbs, and our curriculum is the same as the charter schools in Philadelphia. Why are they not all the same? So when I talked about those examples, it's more so we need to invest in those things directly. I could talk about this all day. The 10-year tax abatement. Why are rich people not paying taxes, and why are those taxes not going to Philadelphia communities and schools? So it's more so we need to follow that money. We need to understand what to fund, and we need to call people out on it, because at the end of the day, a lot of people do not want to fund these things. They continue to oppress, not because they are ignorant, they are willfully ignorant, and they are doing these things on purpose. So by no means is this budget a mistake, right? And we have to stop looking at it like that. People are funding the things that they want to fund. Their families are okay, and we need to make sure that our families and our communities are funded right as well.
Thank you so much, Kendra. For Jacqui, this question is for you. How can we get the city to clean streets and neighborhoods that desperately need this? And how do we address the possibility that cleaner streets may welcome gentrification?
So we need to look at what gentrification is, and that's a structural system. So again, it's going back to the structures, it's going back to the systems. So if it means that the system allows for cleaning to happen and then encourages gentrification, it further confirms the point that we're making, that people make choices and they're willfully making those choices. That shouldn't happen. We shouldn't have to be afraid that if we get our streets cleaned and we have equity in the city, that will be pushed out. That shouldn't even be a conversation.
Agreed. Thank you so much for that. And Chantay, we have a minute left for this question. How can, and it goes off to what your last commentary was, how do we tell the city that these grassroots groups who do preventative justice or prevention and healing, how do we message to the city that these groups need to be funded?
Well, I think we've all been doing that for years. We've been in their faces. We've been writing letters. We've been at city council. We've been doing all those things. We've been marching. We've been pleading. We've been begging. We've been fighting. The next step is to elect them out. And so we have this budget coming. And so I think that when you watch George Floyd being murdered last year, and then you watched what has happened to Black and brown communities during COVID, that if they don't make a change right now, right now, if this budget is not a change, it is so clear that we are insignificant in their even thought pattern. Because what COVID did do, allow people to stand still and to see the ills of how we was being treated in a deeper way. And so I think we continue to push and continue to fight, continue to talk, continue to address it, continue to fight for change, but also get, more importantly, get corporations and private dollars and foundation dollars to help in this effort, because it does change the outcomes. We just can't rely on city dollars, but to get them to change and to ask corporation and foundation to make a shift.
Stay connected with the organizations that presented tonight's conversation. Follow Free Press across social media at Free Press, or bookmark freepress.net. You can also follow Reclaim Philadelphia on Twitter at Reclaim Phila, that's PHILA, Reclaim Phila, or on Instagram and Facebook at Reclaim Philadelphia. And you can follow WHYY across social media at WHYY. Thank you again so much for joining us for WHYY, Reclaim Philadelphia, and Free Press. I'm Chris Norris. Good night.